Christ is king. Now, this is a phrase that we play in the intro here on the show every day. It's a phrase that I certainly use pretty much every morning on X. It's also a phrase that is very traditional in the Christian faith. It goes back several millennia, all the way back to the very start. And another member of the Christian faith, a recent Catholic convert, joins us now to discuss this phrase. Ladies and gentlemen, Candace Owens, the host of the Candace Owens Show. What's up, Candace?
What's up, Jack? It's so good to be here. You guys do such great work here.
Well, I appreciate it as always. Candace, is Christ king?
Last I checked, Christ is in fact king. And it just seems insane that we are having this exact same debate again when it began last Lent season. And now we're understanding that it was funded by the ADL to produce this report to try to demonize the phrase as if it means something else. And I will say this regarding the ADL, they were the same ones that were also pushing through Congress wanting to redefine anti-Semitism and to include things like the Bible. And so it's incredibly alarming to see this sort of inorganic traffic take place again of trying to make Christians ashamed to assert that Christ is in fact king.
Well, I think that's right, and see this partnership with members of the ADL, research partners. There's this report, and we'll go through it. We've got a break coming up, but I want to really dig into this because I think there's a broader picture here. Because I'm starting to see this alignment, a constellation, whatever you want to call it. It is completely inorganic, and that's the perfect word that you used. It's inorganic. This is being done in coordination. There's a stream of this that's going on. There's various people. And one of the big keys of this is that all of the people mentioned to either be slandered, to be attacked, to be considered quote unquote extreme or whatever it might be, they're all Trump supporters. They're all Trump supporters. And somehow this all happens again. This is very, very dangerous stuff that they're talking about here. They're talking about censorship. They're talking about going after phrases. They're talking about a very basic, fundamental Christian faith phrase, Christ is king. And in fact, in the Catholic Church, you can find Catholic parishes all over the place, all over the world. And certainly just in city after city, they're called Christ the King Parish or Institute of Christ the King. Most Catholics can probably name like half a dozen of them off the top of their heads. It's a super common phrase. You see it the iconography all the time, depictions of the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, and he's got a crown on his head. Or in Poland, there's statues of Christ with a crown on his head. So I want to go back to our guest, Candace Owens. Candace, when it comes to this phrase, is this really what they're upset about, this phrase, Christ is king, or is there something else going on? Because it seems to me that this happening in 2025, the same way these types of things were happening all throughout 2017, once Trump got into office the first time, were actually about dividing Trump supporters and trying to sort of gatekeep who is and isn't allowed to be a Trump supporter or who is or isn't allowed to say a certain phrase. It just reminds me of all the same type of garbage that I dealt with that year.
And it's especially telling that the people that are doing this and who are advising MAGA that you have to get these people out of MAGA, expel these people out of MAGA, have never been MAGA. These are the people that have tried to divide and conquer the MAGA from the very beginning. They were the never Trumpers that then reappeared as DeSantis supporters. And then when DeSantis lost, they had no other option. And they're pretending like, we like Trump now. And it's like, no, this is extremely inauthentic. You have been against Trump every step of the way. And I'm supposed to believe now that you're writing these articles, essentially trying to divide Trump supporters, because obviously a very large contingent of us are, in fact, Christians. And by saying, you can be a good little Christian if you just accept that, this phrase is only used by people who are bad Christians. And it's a wacky way to try to divide us, because I think it truly, especially because these attacks keep happening during the Lenten season, that it only strengthens our resolve. I don't think they recognize that a season of penance is a season of spiritual strengthening. Like we are committed to prayer. We are every day thinking about why we are going through this season of penance and preparing for Easter. So it's very strange to me, but I found it suspicious that it was the exact same people involved. And so I'd like to take everybody like on a trip down memory lane
Well,
2024
actually,
Lenten
real
season.
quick, Candace, can I just add? It's also during Lenten season when the Lord challenges us. It's a time of
Yep.
challenging and it's a test of faith. And so I fully accept it. I fully accept
Mhm.
the challenge of my faith. And I do believe that that is why the Lord is allowing this to take place during the Lenten season, because he is calling us to challenge and re-examine our souls and re-examine our faith to bring us closer to Christ. That's the entire point of Lent. That's the entire point of Easter.
And that's why I'm not angry about it, because I think it's
No?
both times it has backfired for the people that think they're executing this attack as a win, like, oh, people will take our side. It has backfired tremendously because it has awakened a lot of Christians who maybe are not so committed in their faith. Maybe you've got people who are not going to mass or not going to church every Sunday, and they're going, what is this? I've never heard of people being upset about the phrase Christ is king. It's utterly bizarre that this keeps happening, but to take the further length here to try to produce a report to legitimatize it with absurd metrics. We've seen an increase of the term Christ is king. Yeah, because you're attacking the phrase Christ is king. Common
Right.
sense, you're going to see an increase. That's like saying, oh, on 9/11, we see an increase in people saying God bless America. Of course, because you guys are randomly choosing to attack this phrase. And then there's this bizarre conflation, and you can see who it is they're fearful of. Like you're mentioned in this report. Why are you mentioning this report? They're doing this entire thing to say that it's being used as a form of anti-Semitism, as a form to speak down to Jews, and yet they show no example of that when they bring up my name, because I've never done that. They don't have shown an
They
example. They're
couldn't
just
find one
broadly
example of
producing
you
a
doing that.
report
Not
and
one.
trying to sort of smear everybody all at once and accusing us of things that we've never done. I would never say Christ is king to just speak down to someone. And by the way, I don't think that's possible. I think truth always helps people no matter what. But it was sloppy. And I was very shocked to see Jordan Peterson, who has been so reputable in the past, to acquiesce to something that was so sloppy. They didn't even spell psychology correctly in the report. And he's a psychologist. I mean, it was maddening.
Well, and here's what it comes down to as well for me is this type of behavior. And I was also very disappointed to see Jordan Peterson's name on there, someone I've always held in highest regard, because it feels like the behavior of the woke. It feels like a woke
Mm-hmm.
style, longhouse style, gatekeeping, speech policing, but also thought policing kind of exercise. And I remember looking at this saying, like, wait a minute. So you guys are trying to tell me that you can look into my mind and you can look into Candace's mind and you know what I'm thinking when I say Christ is king, but you also know what Candace is thinking when she says Christ is thing, and so Christ is king, and so Jack is allowed to say it, but it's a problem when Candace is saying it. I'm like, I reject all of this. I reject all of this completely. Who are you, so-called, self-appointed people, to be able to, number one, determine who's allowed to say this, again, very basic, really just foundational phrase of the Christian faith, certainly at Easter time. But also, if I'm going to go in there and start having discussions about this, then that's me participating in the struggle session, participating in the show trial. And then, I'm going to come in and act like I'm allowed to determine who's allowed to say that. No, as a Christian, as a Catholic, I want people saying it. Of course, I want more people saying it. That's kind of the whole point of having a religious belief, is you want that. You want to encourage that. And guess what? Whatever someone believes, that's between them and God. Okay, that's the cool thing about being Catholic is, what, that's above my pay grade, man, way above my pay grade. And so Candace, that's what I think this is. I think this is like a struggle session.
It is, and you could definitely see the markers of the fact that this is in fact political, and there was nothing here to begin with, and they attacked for no reason. First and foremost, nobody said anything. There was nothing said. There was no event that took place. This report was just released, and the next thing we knew, we had Jordan Peterson on this rant about the Pharisees, who is not a Christian. This report was done by people who are not Christian, who do not profess that Christ is king, which is more stunning. I would never have the audacity to do that regarding somebody else's faith. The other thing that was really compelling, and I only realized this afterwards, was they mentioned Jake Shields. Jake Shields then came out after the report and said, I've never uttered the phrase Christ is king. And then you had Andrew Tate mentioned, and he's a Muslim. So what is this about, Jack? What is this? What they release this as like Christians must wake up to this, and you have people that do not say Christ is King being featured in this.
Folks who use the phrase Christ is King, like, I don't know, like my family members, like everybody I go to church with, or anyone who prays the rosary or just makes, again, the basic fundamental prayers at church, or when you pray in Latin. These are very simple phrases. But it also comes at a time when it's very strange, because the people who are making this assertion say they're just concerned. They're concerned for Christians. They're so concerned that Christians are doing the right thing, even though many of the people who are spreading this thing are not Christian themselves. You have atheists, you have agnostics, you have members of other faiths. And so it's quite strange. I mean, I appreciate your concern, I suppose, but there's a lot more that's going on in the world. Even CNN earlier today was, and because it's going so big and so obvious, that they admitted the minority and Christian slaughters that are going on right now by the Islamicist government of Syria. That this government that's taken over, which, by the way, is receiving billions of dollars in aid from the EU, and I certainly hope they're not receiving any aid from the United States right now. We'll have to look into that. I'll have to call up Elon Musk and get him on that one. But they're slaughtering these minority groups. There's Christians being killed all over the Middle East, and there's not a peep about it. Candace, why is that? Why are they so concerned about what people are saying online, these phrases, and then they try to read our minds and talk about us in such a way when there's actual atrocities against Christians going on literally right now?
I view them as opposite sides of the same coin, to be honest with you. What's happening here is sort of this suppression of saying Christ is King. What's happening over there is Christians are actually being slaughtered, and I've long begun to see this circumstance in which they want to divide Christians in the East and Christians in the West, to divide their concerns. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense that you would be pretending to care about Christians as you're telling them not to declare Christ as King. That declaration is necessary as it is true. And so they are hoping, I think, to fracture as a first step, to just fracture the Christian faith in America. And I think the opposite is happening. I know it's certainly true of the Catholic Church. Membership actually went up last year. People that were being baptized Catholic actually went up last year. And I do think in large part it is due to these like overly gratuitous attacks on our faith. And what naturally happens then as well is, because people awaken and they become more committed in their faith, they begin to pay attention to what's going on around the world, whether you're speaking about what's happening in Congo, as I began speaking about last year, and now people are going, what's happening over here? Syria. I said immediately when I started to understand this issue, and it was not a favorable thing for people to hear, the fall of Assad, I said, this is not going to be good for Christians. I know that he was protecting Christians, and irrespective of what you've read about him, there's obviously now going to be a lot of Christians that are going to die in Syria. I said that in December. That now is the circumstance today. And Nigeria, I mean, there are so many places where you are having these attacks against Christians, violent attacks against Christians that are taking place. And there's just it completely mum in the media about them. It's like our faith doesn't exist. And that's on us, by the way. I want to be clear. I don't put that on the media. I don't put that on somebody else's faith. I put that on us Christians. I put it on the people who declare Jesus Christ, but stay mum on an attack like what happened last week, when you see nobody did anything and suddenly a report is being produced, or people who stay mum when they try to quickly pass something in Congress, making parts of the Bible wrong. It's something that you could potentially be arrested for. They tried unsuccessfully
Candace,
to pass that.
There's a phrase that you used last year, and I use it as well. And it's you talked about being Christian in public, right? Being Christian in public as opposed to just being Christian in private. What does that mean, to be Christian in public?
It means persecution, first and foremost, is something that you should understand. And so in the way that, and I've never felt closer to my faith. And when I understood that, right, to be a Christian is to be persecuted, and that's okay. It's okay that you're going to get tons of comments in after we have this today. You've got people tweeting at you on X, calling you names, saying whatever, people angry at you for not understanding the report, Jack, because you stood up for your faith. And you remember that the cross that we bear is nothing. He wore the thorny crown. Nope. And I have bad news for everybody who doesn't want to hear this. He will rise. Okay. We are in the Lenten season. He is going to rise. And so an element for me of living my faith out loud was when I started to realize this last year, and it came to me like a flood, because I had never realized it. I didn't see it. was just praying in public, small things that I didn't do. And I don't know why I didn't do it, Jack. I can't go back to why that was. But praying in public before every meal, letting people know that you are a Christian and you're proud to be a Christian and that you accept that task that feels so minor, right? I mean, it's like, oh, I've got to deal, Jack, we've got to get offline and deal with mean tweets on the internet. Go watch The Passion of the Christ and remind yourself of how blessed we are that that's the cross that we have to bear, and be strengthened, be happy. And every time I go to mass and I pray, I'm grateful for the challenges. Like, genuinely, like, I was so happy to see this attack. And I know that sounds totally crazy for people who don't have that prayer or don't have that love for the Lord. But I was just going, thank you for this challenge, because I know that it is just going to awaken more of your soldiers that are in this world. And so it's a beautiful thing. We should be happy that it happens. And I want people to walk away with that uplifting message about what it really means to be a Christian. It's smiling when you're being persecuted. That's how wonderful it is to be a Christian.
Amen. And look, if all it takes for us is a couple people being mean online compared to what our Lord did for us 2,000 years ago, I'll take it. I'll take it every day, because it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing compared.